This is your Wednesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Hope everyone's getting some sunshine. Feels like spring might finally be here. Peeked ahead to the future forecast. Maybe some 70s next week. My daughter, my 8-year-old, the oldest in the family, yesterday when it was 59 degrees after school, asked if we could get the slip and slide out. Yeah, she's like, this feels like summer. This feels like how warm it would be if during the times where we'd get out the water toys, get out the pool, get out the slip and slide. I'm like, sweetie, it's not that warm yet, but it feels like it to a lot of us. I had to calm her down a little bit. We went to the playground instead of doing the slip and slide, but that's what it feels like. It feels good, and I hope everybody's enjoying it. Got a lot of good stuff coming up on the show here in a little bit. Chip Scoggins will join me, Star Tribune columnist. Got to talk about the Wild with Chip. He was there Monday night when things did not go well. Understatement. Fans feel like they're numb to the pain a little bit. I wrote about that Tuesday on the Ramball blog. Maybe you can check that out as well. I thought there would be anger about Monday night, but it felt like mostly people were just like, yeah, this is Minnesota sports. This is what happens in the playoffs. It didn't take long to get to that point after, one game against the Blues from a team that felt like it was supposed to be different. And oh, by the way, Wild still betting favorites in Wednesday night's game. Maybe Vegas knows something we all don't know. Maybe you should expect something different tonight. Chip and I got into a few other things as well. We got into some Twins talk and some other stuff. I got to get to some Lynx stuff that caught my eye, and I want to talk a little bit of Grizzlies Warriors because that series has been interesting right after the Wolves and Grizzlies played their very good first-round series. But first, what did I miss? Even though Chip and I talked a little bit of Twins during our segment, I got to get to them right off the jump here because I feel like they've been getting a little bit ignored. We're not used to all this playoff talk in late April, early May. As I've said many times, this is only the third year that both the Wild and the Wolves have been in the postseason in the same year. We went straight from the Wolves to the Wild. Twins, meanwhile, looked like it was going to be a nice distraction from their season when they started 4-8. They've won 11 of their last 12 now, beat Baltimore on Tuesday night. Ryan Jeffers, the big hit in that one, 3-run home run in the 6th inning to break a tie, give them a 5-2 lead. Just kind of coming from every different spot right now. The bullpen has been very good. Joe Ryan was okay on Tuesday night. He didn't even get through 5 innings, but he only gave up the 2 runs. But the bullpen took it the rest of the way in good shape there. The lineup has been getting contributions from a lot of different people. And, you look at the standings right now, and they're starting to get some separation in the American League Central. They're 4 games ahead of anybody else in the AL Central. Nobody else in the AL Central even has a winning record. And the Twins now at 15-9, a .625 winning percentage, which is, among the best in the American League. That is the second best mark in the American League behind the Yankees. So, from 4-8 to 15-9, they're going to cool off at some point here. Obviously, they're not just going to keep winning, 11 out of 12 games. That's ridiculous. They're not going to keep doing that, but whatever the secret sauce is here, and the secret mostly has been pitching lately, although the hitting has been starting to come around, whatever it is has completely surprised me, as Chip Scoggins and I will talk about here in a little bit. It's just, I did not see this coming from this team. I just didn't think they were that good when they were talking about, having confidence at the start of the year. I was like, why? What is it about yourselves? What is it about this team that you like? And, I still can't entirely put a finger on it, but it does seem to me that it does have a lot to do with some of these new players they have in, some of the clubhouse chemistry. Carlos Correa, even though he hasn't hit great yet, he's been hitting better lately, and he brings a certain confidence and a certain calm to this clubhouse that seems like it has been contagious. So maybe even when they had that 4-8 start, they didn't lose confidence in that. So whatever it is that is working, it certainly is working, and is surprising me. We'll see if they can keep it up when the competition gets a little better. They've been lucky to play some teams that are not that great, but overall, you have to say this team right now feels like it could be playing, meaningful games deep into the season and, 12 games into the year. I just did not see that happening.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake for 24/7 gaming, fun restaurants and bars, and luxurious hotel rooms. And join Club M to bask in the rewards. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
Happy to be joined on Daily Delivery today by Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune columnist. He was in the building Monday night, a personal witness to the 4-0 debacle. Is maybe not out of line when you consider the context of what happened in that game, Chip. 4-0 wild loss to St. Louis in the playoff opener, erases home ice advantage. And more than that, when you lose 4-0, you can't just say few bounces here, a few bounces there. If you lose 3-2, you probably say, okay, get them next time and people believe you. But when you lose 4-0, I guess what was your takeaway as you walked out of the building that night?
Yeah, it felt like a lot of wild playoff games I've watched previously. I think back to those Blackhawks series in the 2014, 15, 2012 years where they generate a lot of chances, but they just don't convert them. And that's what I think probably the biggest frustration, and you saw it spill out on the ice there at the end. We can talk about Spurgeon's cross check, but it's, this team should be different because they have high end finishers and scorers with Kaprizov, with Fiala. They have more depth. And so the fact that they were not able to, put one in, I think they hit 3 posts. They were all around the net all night and just didn't convert. And I think you saw their frustration, but they took undisciplined penalties. And I don't know how much of that is they weren't able to score versus this Blues team has just had a lot of success against them. They're 4-0 against them this year. You look at the recent history, they've had the Wild's number. And so game 2 becomes awfully critical tomorrow night, Wednesday night, because they have to figure out a way to solve this Blues team that just matches up well against them.
Short of just playing better, not taking so many bad penalties or just penalties in general. You don't want to engage St. Louis in a game of trading penalties. You don't want the after the whistle stuff. You don't want to turn this into a penalty fest, because the Blues in the regular season had a top 5 power play and a top 5 penalty kill, and the Wild had a bottom half power play and a bottom half power kill. That's not the game you want to play in the playoffs.
No, and we knew special teams were going to be such a big part of this series, and it's interesting. You watch the difference in power plays. When the Blues went on it, it felt like they were going to score anytime they wanted, and when the Wild went on their power play, did nothing. They had chances, but they just there's a big gap between those 2 power plays, and the Wild were 0 for 6. I think the Blues were 2 for 5, or they get 6, but 2
for 6. But then they had the one that was right after
it. Yeah, so it could have been 3. And so they cannot afford to take those kind of penalties, because the Blues they're going to convert a lot of chances on a power play, and so you have to be more disciplined. 5-on-5, they're probably they're okay there, but if they get on. If their PK has to go on the ice, that's not going to be the recipe for winning this series. And so I thought the Blues played really well, great goaltending. They obviously have a very potent lineup too. They scored 309 goals this year. They were, I think, 3rd in the NHL in scoring. So the Wild, I don't think they were good in any phase, to be honest with you. There wasn't a whole lot redeeming about that game for them to draw upon.
They seem to think they played okay, and I don't know if that's just them talking, trying to stay positive after the game, trying to talk up their 5. You know what good 5-on-5 to me is you're good for 3 quarters in the NBA. And look what happened to the Wolves in the 4th quarter. It's just like what wins playoff games in the NBA is the 4th quarter, and what wins playoff games a lot of times in the NHL is special teams. You can be as good a 5-on-5 team as you want, but those moments where you either get a goal, don't get a goal, or you give up a goal on those special teams, that defines a lot of your success. And, if the Wild just isn't very good in that area, they're starting out in a tough spot in this series.
And they talked about it at the end of the regular season. Was it the Calgary game where their special teams were really good? I think they had a couple power plays and their PK was good. And I don't know how many guys came in the press room after that night and said, yeah, special teams are going to be enormous in the postseason because those things can swing games, can swing series. And particularly when you're facing a team that is exceptional in those areas. It's nice to feel like you're playing well 5-on-5 and that you match up. But if you're taking 6 penalties and just being undisciplined, the Jordan Greenway one, when the play was already gone, he cross-checks the guy right in front of the official. I mean, you just can't have that happen because then they came down and scored a power play goal right off that. So it's, I think when they look at the film today, they'll see that, they cannot play that sloppy in terms of taking penalties. And I do think some of it was just their frustration came, flowing out the longer that game went on and they just couldn't convert chances.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about Spurgeon in a minute and goaltending in a minute, but do you, when you don't get any goals, you can look up and down the lineup and want more. Do you feel like the onus is specifically on Kaprizov or Fiala, or is this a team thing where they need to, convert these chances, whoever it is?
Yeah, I would say both. I mean, you hate to say, okay, they can only win if 2 guys score. In saying that, your best players need to be your best players. They're your best scorers. I mean, Kaprizov was a 100-point guy. Fiala came into the playoffs on an absolute tear. And so, yes, you would think you would want those guys kind of leading the way. But at this point, you take it from wherever you can get it. And they have enough depth in this lineup. And you've seen it. It's not just 2 guys. You don't score as many goals as they had just off 1 or 2 guys. And so the 2 big guns need to be better, but everybody needs to be better.
Who would you have? We're gonna find out, I'm sure, at some point here. But who would you go with in goal in game 2? Would you go back to Fleury because otherwise it looks like you're kind of panicking because he didn't play awful. He gave up some rebounds, but he also didn't have a lot of help. Or would you go to Talbot and say, okay, now it's your turn. We've kind of rotated when guys, have a bad game. Now we have someone else we trust. Yeah,
this is a tricky situation for Dean Evason because I agree with you. Like if you make the change now, it could look like one, you're pinning in on loss on the goalie, or you could say we're looking for a spark, or does it show that you're panicking? I don't know. I mean, I think it's one of those things where you in the playoffs you go with your gut and matchups. I probably would maybe give Talbot a chance. I mean, he was playing so well, 13-0-3 in his last 16 starts, but let's also acknowledge that he lost 3 games to the Blues this year, and he gave up 16 goals, 6 twice. And so he didn't play well against them. And so I think that probably factored into why he went with Fleury in game 1, along with Fleury's obviously postseason resume and pedigree. And as I wrote today, is like Fleury was not, he wasn't sharp. He gave, I think, every goal was on a rebound, right? But his defense failed him. I mean, the second one where they just left O'Reilly uncovered, right? They just had a total breakdown in their zone there. So, and when you score 0 goals, it's kind of moot to pin it all on the goaltending. But I'll be fascinated to see what Dean does here, because I think there's some psychological things you have to consider, but also kind of go with who you think is going to give you the best chance to win at this point.
I don't even know who the best chance to win is. That's the thing. Like, they're both good, but they're not. It's not like either one of them is without their flaws or without their weak. You can point to things in both of their cases and say, I'd rather have the other guy. I'd rather have this guy.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's there's not a bad option,
right?
But there's not an option that's so much superior than the other that you say, well, this is an easy decision. I mean, Dean says it's an easy decision, but I don't know how you could say it is. It's easy from the fact that you have 2 guys that you trust, but I think it would be easier if Talbot had played better against St. Louis this year.
Yeah.
I mean, then I think your answer's pretty easy, but the fact that he did not fare well against them. In saying that, I think I would probably come back with him just to see if it gives you a spark and see if, I think the team's going to play better for whatever reason. They were just, I think they got tight when they didn't score, some chances early and they hit post, and then the frustration started and they just got completely out of sorts.
Speaking of frustration and out of sorts, let's finish our wild talk with Jared Spurgeon. I talked about this on Monday's show, but it's so out of character for him. Just, the two-handed cross check to the back of the St. Louis player's, legs while he's down. That could have been a pretty dangerous play. It looked like he was able to skate that one off okay, but does that just show you the level of frustration, both with losing in the playoffs? I mean, Spurgeon's been here for a lot of that with losing to St. Louis. What do you imagine that is?
Yeah, it was totally out of character. And it's not a good look when that's your captain doing that. I mean, your captain, you want to have the even keel, level-headed, and when your captain's losing his cool to that degree, knowing kind of the person that Jared Spurgeon is, the player, that's something that you just don't see from him. I think it's as much the frustration with the Blues, the lack of success against them, and there was so much anticipation and optimism, and the series is not over; it's one game, but you have home ice advantage. You play so well, and there's this feeling that this team is different. And then to play that poorly and have just so many things go wrong in game one, you just kind of snapped. And we're taping this before the NHL announces any kind of discipline. If he doesn't get suspended for a game, he's going to be darn lucky, right? I mean, that just he's lucky the Blues player didn't suffer an ankle injury or calf injury or Achilles injury. I mean, you just can't do that. And so I'm sure Spurgeon probably woke up today with a little remorse for kind of just losing it there for a split second.
Speaking of surprises in the right direction, Twins were 4-8 at one point this season, Chip, and not looking very good doing it. They were 73-89 last season. Again, there was a lot of season left to play after 12 games, but I was honestly not sure if they were going to see the right side of 500 again this season, based on how they looked and based on how a bad start can just totally derail a team. And then all of a sudden they're in first place in the American League Central. They've, winning, got a big hot streak going, won those 7 in a row, kept playing well against Tampa Bay. I mean, did you have more faith in them than I did, or did this come out of nowhere for you too?
No, it came out of nowhere, and you said all those factors that it was based on. I think based on, too, that there were so many unknowns and question marks with their pitching staff. Yes, they had, they brought in some guys that, Chris Archer, he's had some success in his career, but what kind of version of Chris Archer are you getting? Joe Ryan. I mean, all these guys, there's so many question marks, but to their credit, I mean, I don't think many people would say the pitching staff would be this good. I think most of them thought, that lineup will hit. It's pretty good.
Sure.
It was a slow start, I think, for everybody in baseball with the condensed spring training. But I think you felt like if Buxton was healthy, their defense was going to be, dramatically better up the middle. And you felt like that lineup had a chance to be pretty good with Buxton, Correa at the top. And so, but they're just playing good ball now. I mean, Correa's hitting's coming on. Kepler's coming on. The pitching staff has just been phenomenal. Let's be honest, they played some bad teams.
Yeah.
the division doesn't look very good right now. And so I think all of that, they don't have to apologize for that for someone else. They're doing what they're supposed to do. And so, and I go back to this too, Mike, and this is always hard to quantify, but we had that on the eve of the opener, day before we had the kind of the big press conferences, and Byron Buxton said something interesting. Someone asked him about the chemistry in the clubhouse and how it feels, is it different than this year than as opposed to last year with some of these new guys. And he said night and day, which, okay. He said everything now is great, basically what he's saying, which tells you, and that's the difference between winning and losing, but they hadn't played a game yet. And there was a vibe that he felt that was so different than last year. And so how much does that influence the way they're playing? It's hard to know, but if the guys feel good about the makeup of the team and and the kind of the chemistry they have, I think it has to help some, right? It plays some factor. I don't know to what degree, but you could tell that this team likes the way they're constructed.
Yeah, I agree with that. I knew they Phil Miller talked about that even before the season started. I think it was like a week before the season, and he and I did like a season preview, and he's talking about how much, they're talking up the chemistry, they're talking up the start of the year, talking up, the Correa transaction and what that meant to them in terms of, he's a winner,
Yeah.
he's been there before, and the guys they got from the Yankees, and just how they believed in themselves. And I was like, why? I just didn't see like what they saw in themselves. And then I thought that was affirmed by this 4-8 start. So I'm just completely taken aback. And again, it's, all of these are small sample sizes, but as you keep adding games, and we're in May now, the sample size gets a little bit bigger, and maybe, in a weak division, maybe they are the best team.
Yeah. I mean, so much of it is obviously going to depend on how the pitching holds up and injuries. I mean, let's be honest. The more Buxton plays, the more this team's going to win.
Yeah.
I mean, he and Correa is, now you see his bat, what he brings to this team, not only just on the field, but I'm sure leadership. And when you have a superstar, I think it raises everybody's level of play probably a little bit, and he's just such a dynamic player in the field too. And so I mean, they're playing with a lot of confidence, and they're finding different ways to win, some days it's the offense. Other times the pitching is coming through. You're seeing the bullpen. I mean, Duran got the save yesterday, and he's, what a find he is if he can. I talked to your guy Glenn Perkins about the idea of the closer, the role of the closer, and the save and all that now, and he's of the opinion it doesn't necessarily have to be a ninth inning guy. Just if he's your best reliever, put him in the high, most high leverage situations. And so there's a lot of things to like about how they're playing right now. And, but it all comes back to that pitching staff and being pleasantly surprised by what they're doing.
Yeah. Entering Tuesday with the best starters ERA in the American League, second best in baseball. Quick, Chip, Wolves series ended a few days ago, ended with the $30 million point guard on the bench and the $2 million point guard on the floor. What on earth can you do with D'Angelo Russell this offseason aside from please not extending his contract?
Yeah, I mean, when they didn't do anything at the deadline, Mike, I think that I was under the belief and opinion that I was fine with it. Play the season out, see what happens, get a better gauge of who you are and who you want to go forward with. I just don't think you can go forward with D'Angelo Russell. I mean, at the moment of truth, in an elimination game, of a close game, he couldn't be trusted to be on the floor. A $30 million player could not be trusted to be on the floor. You were better off with him on the bench than on the floor. There's your answer. And you can say, well, maybe it's a bad matchup, but there's just too much roller coaster with him, too much. Yes, he has stretches where he looks really good, but there's also, performances where he just seems kind of detached, and I don't know he really fits with what they're doing great. So I would do everything in my power to try to move him and find a different point guard. I just don't know. I definitely would not extend. I mean, that's, you can't do that.
No, he's just how casual he was with the ball in some of those key moments, like just spots where you can't have a turnover. I know his assist to turnover ratio is generally fine, but both he and Towns just seemed like that was maybe a thing they hadn't learned about the postseason yet, that just valuing every possession. He had a couple turnovers when he came back in the fourth quarter in that little 3-minute stint that I'm pretty sure is what got him pulled out of that game, where it's just like, he's just not, the passes are too casual for the moment. Yeah. And that's just kind of him.
Yeah. And that's, across the board, that team clearly doesn't know how to win in the playoffs.
No, not yet.
Not yet. So you don't necessarily say it's just one guy, but he's your point guard, and he's a veteran, and he's a max player. And so you expect more, right? You expect more out of your point guard.
Yeah.
And just the way he played that entire series, I just wasn't good. And I just don't know how you could justify going forward and paying him the kind of money that he's going to want, probably, right? And that's what I say.
He's eligible for to make $40 million a year on his extension. I mean, he's not worth that. I mean, part of the problem is that he signed for probably more than he was worth initially. So then,
well, and then the other thing is because guess what? I mean, Ant's going to get a big contract here,
right? Towns is going to be eligible for a supermax at some point.
Yeah, and McDaniels you're going to pay at some point here, and so to me, it's an easy decision. Now you just have to find a trade partner to to make it work. And I'm soon, expiring contract would be an asset for somebody. But then you have to go out and you have to identify the point guard you want that fits with what Chris Finch is doing and fits with the people, the pieces you have.
Well, we'll see. That was that playoff disappointment led right into another one from the Wild, but we'll see. I mean, it's a long series. Wolves did win game one and then lost the series. The Wild won game one last year and lost the series. So there is a ways to go. Just the way they lost game one does not give you a ton of confidence. Just the way that St. Louis is 13-1-1 in their last 15 against the Wild does not give you much hope. But again, hockey's weird. Momentum is weird. We'll see.
Stay out of the penalty box.
Good stuff from Chip as usual. And he's right. Jared Spurgeon, lucky not to get a suspension. Only got a $5,000 fine for that cross check to the back of the legs. I don't quite understand how these fines go. I get it. It wasn't to the face, wasn't to the head or neck area, which could be more serious. But it's just looking at the replay, looked like there was an intent to injure there that can't be ignored. But maybe like my friend Chicken Fingers 69 said on Twitter when I was wondering about this. He tweeted at me. They suspend cross-checks to the head and cross-checks that result in boarding. If they suspended players for below-the-neck cross-checks that do not catapult someone headfirst into the boards, the ice would be empty. And I guess that's fair. This is hockey. This is what happens. Maybe everyone got really fired up about it after the game because it was, they played the replay over and over again on Twitter and stuff like that. Everybody kept seeing it. But I guess at the end of the day, not a suspendable offense. So lucky for the Wild that it wasn't. Spurgeon should be in the lineup in Game 2 Wednesday night, and we will see if the Wild can put forth a better effort in that game. Let's talk Lynx for a quick minute here. The season starts Friday. Some procedural moves on Tuesday that caught my eye. They cut a whole bunch of players that seemed to be pretty important on their team, including 2020 Rookie of the Year, Crystal Dangerfield, and Laisha Clarendon, who was such an important part of last year's turnaround from that 0-4 start. Now, some of this could be procedural. Kent Youngblood, who does a great job covering the Lynx, noted that by cutting these players right now, and there are 6 cuts total, 2 of them could be back before the opener Friday because they can apply for a couple of hardship waivers. They've got Demiris Dantas injured. Kayla McBride still playing overseas right now. Nafisa Collier expecting a baby in not too long and be out for a while, out for the foreseeable future. So they can apply for 2 hardship spots, and 2 of these players they just cut could be part of that. Now, but the interesting thing is they cut those 6 players, and they brought back Odyssey Sims, who was here a couple of years ago, and she is expected to be on the team and playing by Friday when they have the opener. So a lot of, kind of last minute moves for the Lynx. We'll see how that all shakes out, see who is back indeed and who isn't when the season starts. Let's finish with the cooler. Grizzlies Warriors has been every bit as good as Grizzlies Wolves was. Warriors won the opener in Memphis by a point. Memphis almost came all the way back on them from a double-digit deficit, just like they had done against the Wolves. But Ja Morant missed a tough layup at the buzzer to fall 1 point down in that game. Rematch, Game 2 in Memphis was Tuesday night. Ja Morant, 47 points. Grizzlies win 106-101. That series is tied 1-1. That feels like it's going the distance, just like that Wolves-Memphis series was back and forth, tight games. Does give you a little bit of what if, given that the Wolves played the Grizzlies so tough and now the Warriors-Grizzlies is so close. Would the Wolves have given Golden State a series? Now that series would have been home court advantage for Golden State, whereas these first two games were in Memphis. We'll see how the series goes when it shifts to Golden State. But I do have a little bit of what if wondering when I watch this series. But mostly, I am just entertained because it has been a great series, just like Wolves Grizzlies was. If you can kind of distance yourself from the disappointment of the result in that series. That will do it for today for me. Dane St. Clair, Minnesota United goalkeeper, should be on Thursday's show. Going out to talk to him a little bit later this afternoon, and expecting to have Rachel Blount on Friday's show to talk Kentucky Derby, getting fired up for those two Minnesota connections in the Derby, including a favored horse in that race. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm Michael Rand. Talk to you again on Thursday.